The American invasion is over. Air Force One and the Beast are back home. By the way, the Beast is the president's car, not its occupant. But they've left our leaders with some serious headaches. The Prime Minister says he'll recognise a Palestinian state, but he hasn't yet said where it is or who's going to run it. The Home Secretary won a victory of sorts in the courts over illegal immigration, but so far she plans to send just 1 in every 50 migrants back to France. For the smugglers, it's still probably worth taking the risk. The President warned us that free speech in the United Kingdom is under threat. When you see comedians being cuffed at the airport, it's hard to argue. We'll speak to the Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary, David Lammy. The leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey. The Shadow Chancellor, Conservative Mel Stride. And is free speech really at risk on either side of the Atlantic? I'll speak to the writer, comedian and anti-trans activist, Graham Linehan. Plus, with us throughout the show, Wall Street Journal editor-at-large, Gerard Baker, former Liberal Democrat leader, Joe Swinson, and former Labour advisor, John McTernan. Welcome to Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips. It's the start of the traditional political season, kicking off with the Liberal Democrat Conference. But this conference season really isn't business as usual. As the former Labour grandee John Prescott once said, the tectonic plates are shifting. This year, Labour and Tories are polling at their lowest ever, attracting less than 40% of the electorate between them. And both are desperately trying to catch up to Nigel Farage's reform, leading the polls for over 6 months. On present form, if there were an election tomorrow, there wouldn't be a majority for any party. To add to the mix, there's a new leftist party led by the former Labour MPs Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana. Or maybe new leftist parties, plural. They seem to have split before they've even got a name. The People's Front of Judea jokes write themselves. Add to all that, there's a make-or-break budget on the way, but unusually, the economy's vying for top billing with foreign affairs. And today, the government will confirm it's to recognise a state of Palestine. Looming over all that is the most unpredictable occupant of the Oval Office in generations. And we won't always be able to bring him to heel with a combination of royal charm, banqueting hall bling, and massive dollops of flattery. So, what's ahead? Well, we've got the people here to help bring some order to chaos. Let's get started. And we're going to start this morning with the Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary, David Lammy, who I spoke to just before we came on air. Deputy Prime Minister, there have been drone attacks and incursions into the airspace of Poland, Romania, Estonia in recent days, and we understand it's by Russia. One case for 12 minutes. Now, 10 years ago, the Turks shot down a Russian aircraft within 17 seconds of it entering their airspace. It's never happened again. Why is NATO holding back?
I don't think NATO's holding back. We've sent a Typhoon and a Voyager to support NATO missions in the eastern flank. And of course, we are in close contact with both Poland and Estonia. This is a very serious breach. It's potentially a serious escalation. NATO's eastern flank is taken very, very seriously. I remember being up in Norway discussing these issues in the Arctic, and of course in Poland, in Warsaw, discussing these issues. And Article 4 has been stood up.
Indeed.
And Russia can expect NATO to protect its territory.
Well, that's right. I mean, the Estonians are invoking Article 4, which means that they seem to think it's much more serious than having some Italian or even British fighters fly by. The question I think the Estonians are asking is, why didn't NATO shoot them down?
Well, let's remember our troops are on the ground in Estonia as we speak. because we do take seriously the eastern flank. It would be wrong to comment on operational decisions that are made and judgments that are made.
In a way, that's even worse.
At the time.
That's even worse. Our troops are on the ground and there are Russians flying above them.
And you will recall that there was some speculation initially that this may have been unintended. But what is clear, as of this weekend, is that British troops are engaged in supporting NATO's eastern flank, and we take very seriously any breach by Russia.
Well, I suspect in the Kremlin, they might be saying, we were able to overfly a NATO country for 12 minutes. Nobody interfered with us. Mr. Putin is provoking. He's toying with us, isn't he?
Well, it's definitely the case that he has imperialist ambitions. We're seeing that on the ground in Ukraine. And if you're in the Baltics, they are very seized with Putin's ambitions, no doubt about that. But it's also the case that combined with 27 countries, of course we can face down Putin. He knows that.
All right.
And I'd want to sort of reassure you that whilst we take this seriously, he understands that he would be up against a very, very serious effort.
All right. The big news today is the government plans to recognise a Palestinian state. Is that recognition unconditional, or does it depend on, for example, the release of hostages? Ministers have said both.
Well, look, I don't want to get ahead of what the Prime Minister will say later on today, but when I set out in the UN that Britain was prepared to recognise a Palestinian state, there were two conditions. One condition was, of course, unless Israel entered into a ceasefire, and the second condition was also attaching that to a serious process to get to two states. Well, look, since that announcement in July, in fact, with the attack on Qatar, a ceasefire at this point lays in tatters and the prospects are bleak. And of course, we've also seen Israel move forward with an E1 development, which would run a coach and horses between both North and South West Bank.
Being settlements in West Bank. But
and ensure that you do not get to two states.
You're setting conditions for Israel. What about conditions for Hamas? Are there any conditions for Hamas?
We have been crystal clear. Hamas is a terrorist organisation. There can be no role for Hamas. Actually, as a consequence of the decision that we made back at the end of July, we saw the Palestinian Authority and the Arab League be crystal clear that there can be no role for Hamas, the first time they had done that. So we're absolutely clear. They're terrorists. They should release the hostages. That is unequivocal. But notwithstanding that, Trevor, and this is an important point, when we talk about a Palestinian state and any step to recognise, it is because we wish to keep alive the prospects of a two-state solution. That is what in jeopardy. That's not just about Gaza, it's also about the West Bank, settler violence and expansion.
If you recognise a Palestinian state and Gaza is part of that Palestinian state and Hamas is still in control of Gaza, how does this work? You want to recognise an independent state, but you're telling that independent state who its leaders should be. I think we used to call that a colony.
No. One, let us not confuse the Palestinian people with Hamas.
No,
two, let us recognise...
The question is, who's in government? Are you saying that you will not recognise the Palestinian state if Hamas is part of government? Or are you saying it doesn't matter who's in government and you will recognise them come what may?
Trevor, your viewers know that we are some significant distance from two states. They also know that the only prospect for peace in the regions is two states, and that is why The British government, along with others, has been keen to keep two states alive. I don't want to get ahead of what the Prime Minister might say later on today, but that is what gets us to recognition. No one says that you can recognise with Hamas, and indeed the Arab League and the PA have rejected Hamas. But we have a memorandum of understanding with the Palestinian Authority. We are working to reform the Palestinian Authority, and we have to keep two states alive for the children of both Gaza and the West Bank and East Jerusalem.
I'll tell you why this is not entirely clear. You just told me, I think 3 times, that there are not 2 states, but you're about to recognise the one that doesn't exist. How does that make sense?
Well, I think you're putting this a little simplistically.
No, it's not simplistic.
Trevor,
steady on.
Let me finish the point.
I'm just repeating your words back to me and asking you, what does it mean? There are not 2 states. You're saying you're going to recognise 2 states, because you already recognise Israel. Where's the other one come from?
Trevor.
What's its borders?
Trevor, your viewers know that any decision to recognise a Palestinian state, if that were to take place later on today, does not make a Palestinian state happen overnight. That has to be part of a peace process. It has to be based on 1967 borders. It has to be based on a shared capital in Jerusalem. That will be for final status discussions. But it is to keep that process alive, a process that the United Kingdom has committed to over successive governments. So that is the decision. It is not to say, as night follows day, you recognise one day and a Palestinian state appears the next. No one thinks it's that easy.
OK, we understand that essentially this is symbolic, my word, not yours. So what is your message to the families of the hostages who are still held by Hamas, who have said this weekend that you will have, I'm quoting here, dramatically complicated efforts to bring home our loved ones, that you are rewarding murderers, and have pleaded with you not to take this step?
Well, I met with those families earlier on this month to discuss the decision that we took in July, to listen, of course, to their concerns. And they know that the British government continue to do everything we can in their capacity to see the release of those hostages. But I also explained to them our deep concerns about settler violence, about settler expansion, about the E1 development. And then since then...
But they obviously didn't accept it, did they?
Since then, we have also seen many hostage families sound the alarm bells that there has been effectively an attack on Qatar that has made it very hard to see a ceasefire in the coming weeks. So that's the context into which the Prime Minister will be making a decision later on today.
All right. Let's talk about a couple of domestic issues. The appeals court have ruled that France is a safe country. So is India, by the way. No human rights obstacle returning anyone to France or India. So why is this one in, one out policy still actually about 31,000 in and 3 out? Why aren't you sending people straight back?
Well, the starting point is returns are up 14%, 35,000 return, and as Foreign Secretary, I kept a close eye in the relationships we were striking with a number of countries to make sure that their nationals are returned if they've got no right to be here. The truth is that we exited the European Union, we left the Dublin Convention, we did not have arrangements in place with countries to return.
But it doesn't matter, there's no objection to sending people back to France, it's a safe country.
This pilot is the first step at a negotiated deal with France for one in, one out, and I'm pleased that that has now happened despite attempts in the courts to thwart that. It's the beginning, not the end, of the story.
So here's the problem with this. 1,000 people crossed the Channel yesterday. Even if you got to your target of 50 returns a week at current rates, the probability for anybody getting into one of those boats being returned to France is around 1 in 20. In other words, 19 out of 20 of every boat will be sure that they won't get sent back. That is not a deterrent. What is the point of this?
I recognise that this is frustrating. Of course it's frustrating to see people coming across in this way, and it's deeply, deeply disturbing and troubling when people are losing their lives because of these gangs. But people also want to see the government making an attempt to rebuild a system that was broken by the last
attempt. Nobody's going back.
To rebuild a system that was broken by the last government. This is a breakthrough. Many journalists were suggesting that we wouldn't get there.
Know that they're not going to be sent back. It's not a breakthrough.
Just a few weeks ago, many journalists were speculating that we would not be able to do a deal with France. They were then speculating that the court would thwart that deal with France. We've got that deal, but I've said to you, Trevor, it's the beginning. It's not the end. It's an important deal to have struck, and we can build on it over the coming months and increase the numbers.
All right.
And that's what I expect the Home Secretary will be doing.
OK, are we heading towards derogation from the ECHR, the European Convention of Human Rights, in order to make it easier? Or maybe just how it's applied? That's what the Home Secretary's been talking about.
Well, the first thing to say is I've heard those who said we should pull out of the ECHR. It would undermine the Good Friday Agreement. It would undermine our fight against terrorism.
We're not talking about that. We're talking about specifically Article 8, which is the right to family life, so people can't claim...
But just...
You can't send me back because of, you know...
But just in...
My girlfriend or my cat or whatever it happens to be.
But just in the first 2 weeks in this new post as Justice Secretary, I was speaking to my Danish colleagues about the concerns that we have around Article 8 and whether we can come together as European colleagues to look at the ways in which we believe people are attempting to thwart, particularly areas around right to family life. How can we look at this again, and how can we come to a new arrangement? And that work has, yes, must begin.
How quickly might we see action on that? 1,000 a day?
Well, I hope...
How quickly can you get something done?
Well, you will recognise that to make this effective, you've got to work right across Europe. This is being raised by many European allies. I believe we can get together following my predecessor going to Strasbourg, and we will attempt to deal with it.
All right, let's come to your own new responsibilities for prisons. Can we expect to see further rounds of early releases to relieve overcrowding in jails?
Well, I was very pleased to have the second reading of the sentencing bill. As part of that, we are going to deal with the horrendous situation we inherited. It was a situation in which the last government found just 500 new places in prison over their 14 years in power. We will get to 14,000 by 2031. But we have to have punishment that works. And that means we cannot continue to have the recidivism rates and the reoffending rates that we see. Prison isn't working if people continue to constantly reoffend, and that is what we're attempting to do. And that's why I put 700 million into the probation system.
All right. OK, just before you go, let me just ask you a question about your previous responsibility, and that was as Foreign Secretary. You oversaw the appointment of Lord Mandelson to Washington. Last week, Peter Kyle told me that you knew that there had been a risk, but you thought it was worth taking the risk. The Prime Minister says new information's come to light and all of that. The question I think I want to know is, there's this very expensive and extensive vetting process that goes on, supposed to uncover material that is not available to most people. Yet it failed to discover information that journalists got hold of and gave to the government. Are you going to overhaul that vetting process?
Well, look, I think that clearly there was a security and vetting process. The Prime Minister has made clear if we knew what we know now, he would not have made the decision to appoint Peter Mandelson. You will recognise that we rely on the system. This has been a complex case in which further information has come to light, and that affects the political judgment. And that political judgment is effectively that Peter appeared.
Well, we went through all of that. Forgive me, we went through all of that.
That's the
with
decision.
your colleagues.
That's a judgment call. That's not really about a vetting process.
All right.
That's a judgment call that politicians did not know at that time.
All right. I read this morning, just very briefly, that your name's in the running to be next ambassador to Washington. You fancy it?
Well, look, the Prime Minister's decided I'm Deputy Prime Minister, Lord Chancellor and Secretary of State for Justice. I think adding a fourth job to the mix would be a little bit too much.
No, but you'd be swapping all of that for a lovely mansion, I think it's on Massachusetts Avenue, isn't it?
We've got some fantastic diplomats. I think there are some good names to choose from. Thank you.
Ah, that was a piece of diplomacy. Thank you very much, Deputy Prime Minister. Well, let's see what our panel made of all that. We're joined all morning by Wall Street Journal editor-at-large, Gerard Baker, the former Liberal Democrat leader, Joe Swinson, and the former Labour advisor, John McTernan. I just want to make clear that David, Lammy and I did not coordinate our wardrobes this morning. It's entirely accidental. Joe, do you support this recognition of a Palestinian state?
Yes, I think it's overdue. I think what we're seeing in Gaza, I mean, it is just heartbreaking, right? But it's beyond that, right? Because it's so avoidable. You've got hospitals being bombed, you've got children being starved. I read the testimony of a doctor from a Gaza hospital who talked about on different days victims would come in with specific body parts. So on one day, there'd be so many injuries to the legs, and on another day, it would be the abdomen, as if they were being used in target practice, right? What we are seeing on our screens is horrific. The UN report has recently said that it is a genocide. It is a genocide that is taking place there. And although there are limits to the power that the UK has in that situation, recognising Palestine is one of the things that we can do to increase the pressure.
The Israelis, of course, would contest that account of events, but I think that the important question this morning is, will it make a difference? What do you think, Gerard?
No, it won't make any difference whatsoever. It will probably make things worse for everybody, frankly. To me, it's a politically cynical move designed to help Keir Starmer overcome his many problems by appealing to a part of his domestic base, which is both geopolitically nonsensical. There is no Palestinian state. There won't be a Palestinian state until there is a broader diplomatic arrangement. It is diplomatically an error because it's going to put the UK seriously at odds with the United States and with Israel. And it's morally repugnant because it is exactly what Hamas, the terrorists who committed the acts of October the 7th and who tried to, the real genocidal terrorists in that region, who tried to kill as many Jews as they possibly could on that day. This is exactly what they want. I know the government says, actually, well, of course we want a Palestinian state, but we don't want Hamas to run it. But that makes no sense either. So it's going to hurt the UK politically and geopolitically. It's going to hurt ultimately the Palestinian people. The only people who are going to the only entity that benefits from this is Hamas, the terrorist organisation.
John, the cynics, of course, are saying that this isn't really aimed at anybody in the Middle East, but it is aimed pretty squarely at the dissent on Labour's own backbenchers.
The first thing to say is it is significant if a member of the Security Council, a permanent member of the Security Council, which the UK recognises Palestinian statehood. And it is also very important to say that the world constantly says it would like a two-state solution. You can't have a two-state solution if there aren't two states. The fact that the Palestinian state itself, Hamas, because they support the recognition of Palestine, it doesn't disallow other people from saying that's the right thing to do. The Israeli government, over time, has been seeking to get a two-state solution. The issue about should the Labour Party and the Labour government respond to what voters in Britain believe? Yes, it should. Should it respond to what its backbenchers believe? Yes, it should. We're a political party and a political movement, and we are Labour, and it's been a terrible delay, actually, in the government saying it would recognise this, and it has been, as Joe said, the suffering in Gaza is appalling. And it cannot be right that so many children have had limbs amputated. Those children have to be the most innocent people involved in this.
It is worth saying, and unusually I don't actually have a chart to throw at you today, but I do know that there's some data out this morning which says that you're quite right. people, the public supports the idea of the recognition of a Palestinian state, but with conditions. First, the most important one being return of the hostages. And as far as I can make out, the government's not demanding that.
The biggest number in that survey says that people don't want the recognition of a Palestinian state while Gaza is controlled by Hamas. And do you know what? Gaza is controlled by the IDF. It's not controlled by Hamas.
Oh, if Israel were to withdraw, it would clearly be controlled by Hamas. And Trevor, you're exactly right. And the people who responded to that poll are absolutely right. The killing and the suffering that is terrible in Gaza could end right now, could end today if Hamas handed back the hostages, committed to to giving up their weapons, to abandoning their ambition of eliminating Israel and every single Jew who lives on the earth. That is their stated ambition. They could, if they did that, Israel, the war would be over, the suffering would be over. The responsibility for the suffering in Gaza lies with Hamas, and for Israel to be blamed for this, trying to defend itself from people who want to destroy it, it seems to me to be really morally disordered.
I'm going to come back to you in a second, Joe, but Jerry, there is a question though. There's no sign that the current Israeli government has any interest in a two-state solution. In fact, I think Netanyahu has said in terms. Yeah. Not going to have it.
That's understandable, after all, because if a two-state solution means Israel has to sit beside a state that is committed to its elimination, which, there have been periods in the past where that didn't seem to be the case. The Oslo Accords, where the Palestinians were offered essentially 98% of the lands where they are now, that could have worked. The Palestinians rejected that. The Palestinians, of course, rejected a two-state solution straight after the Second World War in 1947 when they were first offered it. The situation that Israel finds itself in now as a result of what we saw on October the 7th, as a result of what we see with Iran's dominance in the region, is living side by side with a state that wants to eliminate it. Of course it won't accept it.
Look, I mean, nobody is defending Hamas. Of course, Hamas have got agency in this to be able to end it. But to say that the suffering that is happening is only the fault of Hamas, when you have the role of the Israeli government and the Israeli forces who are not allowing food to reach people, who are opening fire on people as they are approaching the trucks or the aid stations. I mean, there is suffering upon suffering upon suffering being heaped on people in Gaza, on innocent people in Gaza, on children, on people who have done nothing wrong. And that is also as a result of the actions of the Israeli government, and they could change that tomorrow.
How does recognising a state change that?
Well, look, it is significant for the reasons that John says, right? And it is about trying to put pressure on. I mean, obviously, we've just had Trump here, in all the glory for the state visit. He is the other person who has significant, agency and control in this situation. And we do need to use our role to put pressure on.
In the end, you have to make peace with your enemies. You never need to make peace with your friends. And this is the difficulty of, there's two peoples trying to occupy the same territory. Both sides are going to have to compromise. Having to find a way back to talking about a road to peace starts with two states. And we look at Gaza City, you look at Gaza itself, how long will it take to rebuild all that's been destroyed? We live in London. London was in a war in the 1940s. The last bit of bomb site in London was built over when Ham Yard was developed. It's within 4 or 5 years ago, before the pandemic. That's the problem. Reconstruction, physical reconstruction, takes forever. Social, civil, political reconstruction. Yeah, the PLO are a problematic organisation in the West Bank, but everything has to be modernised together to guarantee peace.
I'm glad you raised the Second World War analogy, because we had to win the Second World War because we were faced with an entity, Nazi Germany, that wanted to destroy us.
Not a terrorist
organisation. To take over our country, wanted to take over essentially most of the world. There was terrible suffering inflicted by the British and the Americans on the German people. More than 1 million Germans died. German civilians died as a result of bombing. Nobody said then in Britain, we can't do that, there's this terrible suffering, we've got to stop. Because the understanding was they had to be defeated. The Nazis had to be defeated. There were some things that were done that I don't think were necessary. unnecessary and that were morally dubious. But they had to be defeated. This is the situation Israel finds itself in today. It is a tragedy, of course, that so many people are suffering. But unless you defeat the people who want to wipe you out, that's not going to be a solution. It's just going to create further conflict down the road. Israel is right to try and end this war in the way that it needs to end it. And Hamas, again, could end it just as Nazi Germany ultimately ended in 1945 by surrendering.
Well, I think we can start to see the contours of the debate that is going to continue after a declaration. We'll talk a little bit about the other thing we talked about, which is migration, a little later. But it is 9 o'clock. You're watching Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips. In the last hour, the Deputy Prime Minister has told this programme that the government's recognising a Palestinian state to keep a two-state solution alive. David Lammy said that the one-in, one-out deal with France was just one part of their efforts to stop small boat crossings. There's lots more to come this morning. Shortly, we'll hear from Liberal Democrat leader Sir Ed Davey as day 2 of their party conference gets underway. And with all roads leading to the budget in a couple of months, we'll hear from Shadow Chancellor Sir Mel Stride. Plus, as America debates the suspension of talk show host Jimmy Kimmel, is free speech under threat? We'll speak live to a man who's had his own controversies in recent weeks, the comedian and writer Graham Linehan. Well, Liberal Democrats are the third biggest party in Parliament, and they're holding their party conference in Bournemouth this weekend. The party's leader, Ed Davey, told this programme that Elon Musk is a criminal for inciting violence at a recent Tommy Robinson organised march and for failing to stop child sexual abuse material on his platform, X. We took a trip to the seaside to speak to Sir Ed. Ed Davey, do you support the decision of the British government to recognise a Palestinian state?
Yes, we do. Indeed, Liberal Democrats have been campaigning for this for many years, even for the appalling Hamas attack on Israel. And so it's a long-standing Lib Dem policy. We think it's the right thing to do so we can move towards real peace between Israel and Palestine and have that two-state solution that Liberal Democrats have long believed in. It's a really important step.
Do you genuinely believe that the two-state solution is still an option? Pretty much everybody now says that the Israelis would never bear it. Hamas has been clear that they don't want it. Where will that come from?
Well, I think there are still forces of moderation on both sides who would move towards that. So, for example, I occasionally speak to Yair Lapid, who's the leader of Yesh Atid. He's the leader of the opposition. He was briefly Prime Minister. And he has previously gone to the UN and called for a two-state solution. I recently met the leader, the President Mahmoud Abbas, President of the Palestinian Authority. Although there's lots of governance issues with the Palestinian Authority, I think they would be the sorts of people who could come to the table. And I hear what you've said, and there are people saying exactly what you said, but I reject that. I think if you're going to have the security for Israel that it deserves and should have, and also the justice and the security that the Palestinians should have, I can't see a better solution than the two-state solution, difficult though that will be to achieve.
You're calling for Elon Musk to be prosecuted under the Online Safety Act. Are you saying that Elon Musk is a criminal?
Yes. Not just because of the awful things he's done in inciting violence, and for example, he says a civil war in our country is inevitable, that our democratically elected government should be overthrown. They were bad enough. But on his platform, there are examples of adverts pushing people on self-harm, on grooming, even selling videos showing paedophile acts, child sex abuse acts. And I think he should be held to account for them, him personally and his business. Ofcom now have the powers under the Online Safety Act. The question is, I know that's a new act and maybe we need to give them a little more time, but I personally think they need the encouragement and the support to take on powerful people, and we shouldn't just let powerful people get away with it.
And so your message to the Home Secretary is if Elon Musk happened to land on British territory, arrest him?
Yes. Well, Ofcom, obviously, they're in charge, they're the independent regulator. However...
Well, you said he's a criminal, so...
I'm not a member of the police or Ofcom, but I believe that standard has been met. I mean, it's quite shocking, isn't it, that on X platform they've got rid of some of their safety teams, their child safety teams, under Elon Musk's watch. They used to have them there, they no longer, because he's cut back. And I think he's just interested in his bank account. I'm interested in the safety of our children. And it is quite wrong, that his business puts on these adverts. It's disgusting, and I think everybody, I hope everybody watching this will agree with me and the Liberal Democrats that we should take really strong action against him.
Let's talk about the political situation. Current polling suggests that you are the least unpopular party leader. Congratulations.
There's another way of putting that, by the way, Trevor.
But interestingly, the only party whose name occurs on your schedule is Reform. Is Reform the party that you're really afraid of?
No, we want to show our case why people should vote Liberal Democrat in a really positive way. We will say that the government isn't delivering. We want to remind people how dreadful the Conservative was, and we want to warn people about the threat of the divisive politics of Nigel Farage. So, but the best way to do that, Trevor, is to show people what Liberal Democrats stand for. That's why at this conference in Bournemouth we'll be talking about our policies on NHS and care and social care, the only party in the opposition talking about that, our policies on helping people with the cost of living, halving people's energy bills over the next 10 years. These are the sorts of policies that are unique to us that I'm afraid someone like Nigel Farage would make worse.
The top issue, of course, for most parties now is the question of migration. There are nearly 500 asylum seekers in the constituency where we're, or the authority, I should say, where we're sitting, which is controlled by your party. How quickly do you want those hotels emptied?
Well, every council, whether it's run by Liberal Democrats or others, needs support of the Home Office, who've not been doing good enough job on this, in my view. What happened under the Conservatives is they allowed a big backlog of asylum applications to get going. They said they did it deliberately, and they should apologise for that. The new government's come in and says they're going to tackle it, but they've frankly been very timid and unambitious. That's why Liberal Democrats are saying, let's call it what it is, an emergency. Let's set up Nightingale processing centres, a bit like the Nightingale hospitals we had in the pandemic. Let's recruit 4,000 extra caseworkers, a tripling of the Home Office caseworkers, and get that backlog down. If you did that, and we think you could do it in under 6 months, this comes back to your question, under 6 months, we could close not just asylum hotels here, but across the whole country.
So you think that we don't need to use military bases or anything like that, as both the government and Reform are talking about?
Well, it shows they're not ambitious enough, doesn't it? Let's get rid of the asylum backlog straight away. And those people who don't have...
Yeah, but everybody says that. Everybody has said that.
I've shown you...
But even if you got rid of some of them, you're
Trevor,
still going to have to put them somewhere. My question is, how quickly do you want asylum hotels closed in the constituencies where you control? And secondly, what would you do if a military base was opened up for asylum seekers in a constituency, in a local authority controlled by Lib Dems? Would you cooperate in changing the planning regulations to make that possible?
Well, let me come back to my answer, because I think it really deals with your questions you just asked. The truth is, the Conservatives created this backlog. That's created the hotels. People like Robert Jenrick actually opened asylum hotels, and now protesting against them. They opened them up in the first place. And the key challenge is, how do you get them down? And what I put forward to you today...
No, but you're telling me about what they did. I'm asking you what your guys would do now.
And I'm telling you what we should do.
No, I'm not. What would you do if
I'm telling you that.
Confronted with the choice?
I'm telling you exactly that. What we need is a state of emergency to get the asylum applications down to zero, the backlog down to zero, and then we can close the hotels.
You'd refuse to vary the planning regulations to allow military bases to be used in authorities where controlled by Lib Dems?
We would act responsibly in every case, but here's the point. As a national politician, even a national party, I think the people of our country, almost from any part of the political spectrum, want a party that's going to deal with practical ways of sorting out this big backlog and sorting out illegal immigration.
I'm asking you about the practical question. You keep saying, you keep not answering what you would do.
I think I've given you a very practical way forward.
All right, look, you said in a newspaper interview published this weekend, that you feel very Middle England, I'm quoting you, and that you represent Middle England of church and community. Does that mean that you identify with the 150,000 people who were on the streets of London last week, marching, and I was there, so these were their demands: stop immigration, protect free speech, and revive Christianity, church and community?
Well, obviously there was 150,000. You were there. I don't know what they all stood for. I know Tommy Robinson and his followers are a political group that I completely disagree with. I think they are abhorrent. But that doesn't mean, as I think you reported at the time, that people who were in that march followed Tommy Robinson. What many people are protesting about, I think, and I heard some of them being interviewed, they're protesting about the problems in their local NHS. They're protesting about the cost of living and maybe free speech as well. But guess what? We're a party of free speech. We're a party that wants to tackle the cost of living problems. We've got a plan to reduce people's energy bills by half over 10 years on the NHS. We've led that debate. I'm afraid Reform would like to bring in American-style health insurance and make people pay for their health. We're the only party with a really well thought-through plan of reforming it, particularly by investing in care.
So you would identify with the demands that were made by... And I was there. The Tommy Robinson group was a very tiny minority. Most of those people were there, bring down immigration, solve the backlog, as you've just been talking about, pro-free speech, you've just said you're in favour of, and Christian revival. You yourself are a Christian. So actually, Lib Dems would be pretty close to the mainstream view on that march, wouldn't they?
I don't know about who the mainstream is.
Well, from what you've just told me, that's what they were saying.
Well, what I can do is I can speak about our values and our beliefs, which I think are in tune with the vast majority of people in our country. I think people want a country that's decent and caring, that looks after people on the NHS, that makes sure our traditional values like free speech are kept to, and that's the Liberal Democrats. The problem I have with people like Reform is they want to move our party more like Trump's America.
All right.
And free speech is being closed down in Trump's America, and people pay for their health in Trump's America.
Very quick last question. When you were in coalition, you brought in the triple lock on pensions. There's talk about Rachel Reeves essentially abandoning it at the budget.
She shouldn't. And let me tell you why the triple lock is important, because often this debate isn't properly heard. I'm really pleased you raised it. When we brought it in, it was after decades of our pensions in our country falling behind the pensions in other countries. Our state pensioners, before we brought in the triple lock, were some of the poorest in the Western world, much poorer than in countries that are much less wealthy than we are. So the triple lock is all about making sure British pensioners get a decent share like their other pensioners in other countries. Surely that's the right thing. At the moment, they haven't caught up anywhere near.
So absolutely keep it.
100%.
Davey, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
That was Sir Ed Davey. Sky News has approached X and Elon Musk for a comment, but as of broadcast, we've received no response. Well, X maintains that it does have zero tolerance for child sexual abuse material and claims that tackling those who exploit children is a top priority. This is what they say. We have zero tolerance for any forms of child sexual exploitation and remove certain media depicting physical child abuse to prevent the normalisation of violence against children. Our priority is to protect minors from physical and psychological harm, irrespective of the context in which the content may be shared. Let's go back to our panel, Gerard Baker, Joe Swinson and John McTernan. John, leaving the legals aside, arresting Elon Musk.
I've never heard Ed Davey say anything so illiberal in my life. He declared that Elon Musk's a criminal and said he should be arrested. It's like, what is free speech if it's not the ability to be offended by a man speaking on live broadcast from another continent? I don't know. I mean, I don't think what Elon Musk said was a helpful contribution to British political discourse, but it was clearly rhetorical. And if we're going to jail people for their rhetoric, almost everybody in the House of Commons uses a military analogy from time to time. Big guns, there's all kinds of... The language should be probably demilitarised, but I think it's extraordinary to say that this would be a thing you could do. However, the one thing we've done, well, one Brexit freedom that we've actually properly exploited in the UK is the ability to bring in an online safety bill, and that actually would have taken forever within the European Union. We've done it. It's the beginning. It's flawed, but it's actually, we have to regulate this space because it is a space that impacts on people. But I do think the idea of arresting Elon Musk is... arresting General Pinochet, as we talked about a bit earlier, that was the right thing to do. He was a fascist dictator.
So if Labour ministers want to arrest people, it's fine. But poor old Liberal Democrats...
It was a Spanish government who were asking for the arrest warrants. I think it's fair enough. Extradition, all that.
It is an interesting concept, a bit out there, though, Joe, isn't it?
Well, look, I think the point that John made about online safety is the key one, and that's what Ed was talking about. I'm a parent of an 11-year-old, just started secondary school, and the conversation between all of, the group of parents, it's all about how do we keep our kids safe when they start to get a phone, that online thing. You do the Green Cross code, you do all of that stuff in the physical world. The thing that is terrifying parents is how do we keep our children safe online? And I think it is absolutely true that the main platforms have not kept up to proper standards, whether that's on child sexual exploitation, whether that's the kind of pro-suicide, pro-self-harm type sites and content that's out there, pro-eating disorders. There's a whole host of things. And there is an important point about freedom of speech. That does matter. I'm sure we'll get into that more later. But it's not a case of anything goes where you have like a public square. I mean, if you had somebody coming to the town centre and walking around distributing flyers in favour of self-harm, we would take action about it, right? So I think to make really clear that the people who are now holding so much power by holding that public space have a real responsibility with that is absolutely right.
I want to come back to the issue of free speech a bit later, but Jerry, what I found very interesting about Ed Davey's language now, which is a little bit tougher than we've come to expect from Liberal Democrats, is that he is positioning himself as a champion of Middle England. I'm quoting him there. They're being squeezed, aren't they?
Yeah, clearly they are. I mean, what's interesting is that the Liberal Democrat support has held up, pretty well, very stable since the election, where there's been this extraordinary churn between Labour, Tories and Reform. The Liberal Democrats do seem to be continuing, to register in the sort of high teens in the opinion polls. Yeah, they are being squeezed. And, you asked him, and Trevor, you read a very good piece this week in the Times about that rally in London last weekend when much of the media were describing this as a bunch of Tommy Robinson-loving fascists. You pointed out that actually there's a lot of actually decent, ordinary British people who've just had enough of what's going on with their country. And I think maybe that message, maybe your column, maybe the wider message of that demonstration has got home to Ed Davey, that these are not all, kind of ranting, that anybody who waves the English flag is not automatically sort of sums it to be sort of under Ed Davey's new sort of criminal approach, sort of thrown straight in prison, as he'd like to do with Elon Musk. So yeah, they clearly are. They are beginning to get a bit of the message. I just don't think, to be honest with you, that they have anything like the kind of standing with most of those voters, most of those people, to be able to win them over in the way that Nigel Farage is able to.
I'm just going to come down off the cloud of the idea that anybody is reading my column and being influenced by it. Never mind Ed Davey. But here's where we are. And Jerry's right, actually. The Liberal Democrats have basically been pretty stable, and they've got more seats than they ever have done before, while everybody else is going up and down.
Biggest party in local government, Liberal Democrats. Biggest parliamentary representation in a century, Liberal Democrats. And sitting there in what is a 5-party, and in Scotland and in Wales, a 6-party system, 13.6%. is not across the country, it's in locations. The southwest of England looks to me like a former Tory area, like a stronghold in local government, and it looks as though the Lib Dems are positioning themselves to be a major part of a multi-party. If Reform were to stay on 30%, that's a category killer. They get everything. They swoop out because they're first past the post. But there's something in here about the viability of parties who can match their proportion to where the voters are. And the Tories have got a problem, which they've got more votes, but they're spread so thinly, they look to... So I think this is a new political landscape for us that we have to really think about.
The number crunchers, Joe, tell us that this picture will represent a an outcome in which no party can assemble a majority without a coalition. I asked Davey, what the price for a coalition with Labour, which is the most obvious partner, would be, and obviously he would say, we're fighting
arresting
blah, 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 blah.
Elon Musk.
But,
And the pollsters, arrest the pollsters.
how likely do you think it is that the Liberal Democrats could head for another coalition with Labour, which proved in the end, not, as you will know to your cost, was not actually that great for the Liberal Democrats?
Well, yes, the experience of 2010 to 2015 is certainly still very present in the party's memory. I mean, as is the experience, talk about Middle England, I'm a Scot. We did govern in Scotland between 1999 and 2007 with the Labour Party. So, we do have experience of coalition with different parties. I think part of the challenge is not whether we have experience of making coalition work, but also how that is perceived within a country that is not so used to coalition government. And clearly that can be still very difficult. In reality, when you see a picture like that with the polls, people are finding different outlets for their concerns. I think it's partly that there is something wider in the political system that is not working, that people have concerns that are not being responded to. And in a very polarised and divided society, that also, ironically, makes it harder to get good outcomes from parties working with each other, like happens in many countries as the absolute norm. And I think it would be helpful to get there, but that also requires you to do things like disagree well with people in other parties, which takes us back to some of that free speech issue.
They can watch us for disagreeing well. Next, we'll hear from the Shadow Chancellor.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
I want to start the programme today with an aim, a story that I can't get out of my head. The campaign has now started. This is your chance. Tell people this is the politics hub. It's not correct. The tax burden is projected to go up.
No,
but I'm not. This is my interview. Look, this is ridiculous.
No one does care about us.
I'm really interested in that. On the politics, how he likes to push the boundaries. He's got the majority. The question is, what is he going to do with it?
I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories.
This is insane.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa. I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
We call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News, get the full story first.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling.
It's not his country, it's ours.
Sky News, the full story first, free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in.
The week started disastrously for the Conservatives, with Danny Kruger defecting to Reform. It was widely considered pretty significant given his position and reputation in the party, which he said was now finished. A little earlier I spoke to Conservative Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride. The Prime Minister plans to recognise a Palestinian state today, or say he will, and your leader says that this would be rewarding Hamas. Do you accept that there has to be a path to the two-state solution that you all say you want?
Yes, of course. We want a two-state solution. We want a secure Israel alongside a viable, sovereign Palestinian state. But you've got to ask the question, what is this recognition going to actually achieve? It's not going to release the hostages. It's not going to lead to humanitarian aid going into Gaza. It's not going to take one further step on that route towards peace. And what you do in negotiations, Trevor, as you know, is if you give something quite significant, then you expect something in return. You have to use the leverage of that moment. And that is what this government has failed to do. And if you then ask the question, well, why have they therefore done what they've done? That is because of the pressure that the Prime Minister is receiving from both within his cabinet and backbenchers. And that is not a good way to make foreign policy.
Well, the Deputy Prime Minister said to me this morning that they warned the Israelis weeks and weeks ago that they would go ahead with recognition if the Israelis didn't do something about the settlements, didn't do something about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. That hasn't happened, and that therefore everybody was warned. And this is a way of actually getting things to move.
Well, no, as I say, they've got absolutely nothing in return. And also amongst those stipulations were a ceasefire and moves towards a two-state solution. We're a long way from the latter, at the very least. And it was totally naive to think that putting forward those conditions was going to result in that kind of movement. And as I say, what has happened is that Keir Starmer's backbenchers and members of his cabinet have forced him into this position to make this move, which is not going to do any of the positive things that I've referred to earlier, and has taken leverage off the table, and that's not good foreign policy.
Well, when you say taking leverage off the table, I mean, it's hard to see what leverage can do. For example, are you supportive of the Israelis' latest drive to clear out Gaza City? Do you think that's helping to resolve the situation in any way?
We know that Hamas has Israeli hostages. Some of them, very sadly, will be dead. Some will be alive. It is within their power to release those hostages. We know that Hamas is a terrorist organisation. This government, supported by the Conservative Party, prescribed Hamas fairly recently as a terrorist organisation. And Israel has every right to deal with them.
Well, it may have every right, but is the action that it's taking in Gaza now helping to resolve the situation?
Well, Hamas has to be dealt with, and Hamas has it within its power to release hostages, to lay down its weapons and so on. But you can't have a situation where you have, and bear in mind, Trevor, a lot of these terrorists, of course, are lurking within civilian areas, which they know complicates matters in ways that are deeply unfortunate. But that is the way that they operate. But Hamas has to be defeated and dealt with.
All right. The Chancellor is preparing her budget, which she will unveil the back end of November, I think. Other than resign, what advice would you be giving her?
Gosh, that is like saying somebody has crashed a car into a wall at 100 miles an hour and then you saying to me, here we are, take the steering wheel and get out of that one if you will.
No,
The mistakes that have been made, if I could answer it this way.
You're a patriotic guy. You want to help the country.
Of course. OK, so what she's got to do is she's got to start reviving the animal spirits in our economy. You have got a business, the business community in our country has been absolutely flattened by very high taxes, by talking down the economy, by inflation being higher than other countries because of the fiscal decisions that this government took, which means interest rates higher as well, which has led to huge servicing costs on our national debt, to which this government has readily been adding. And all of that adds up to lost fiscal headroom and higher taxes in the autumn. So to answer your question, I would not have gone into that position in the first place. We would have come into power. We would have been focusing more on growth.
This is that old joke, isn't it? I wouldn't start from here.
We most definitely would not. And we would have done differently. We'd taken different choices on taxes. We would have taxed the living daylights out of business. We'd have focused on productivity. You know, they came in, they gave 14% to the train drivers, 22% to junior doctors, not a single productivity string attached, and we'd have dealt with welfare. Getting the welfare bill down is key to getting tax off the backs of the population and particularly business.
OK, well, that's interesting. OK, other than let's get a time machine, your point about welfare is very interesting because the biggest component in that area, of course, is pensions. Would you stick with the triple lock on pensions introduced by your party, which, of course, is going to cost us another £6 billion next year?
We remain committed to the triple lock. Look, the triple lock came in under the Conservatives in 2011 for good reason, which is that the previous Labour government had seen us get to the point where we had the fourth highest level of pensioner poverty in Europe, which was a pretty disgraceful situation to have arrived at. We've seen 200,000 pensioners come out of absolute poverty as a result of the policies we pursued in government, including the triple lock.
But in reality, I mean, you're a very numerate person. £6 billion next year, I think another £40 billion by the middle or towards the end of the next decade. Do you genuinely believe that the triple lock is sustainable and morally justified, given that more than half of pensioners now are asset millionaires?
So the way to ensure that we have a sustainable economy is to get it growing, which means different choices on tax, big decisions around the size of the state, big decisions on skills and higher education,
I'm asking about a specific
controlling
point.
Welfare. But this is the important point. If you look at the OBR's fiscal sustainability report, which looks out decades and is the point that you're referring to, I think, and you look at how it's all going largely out of control through time, OK, the debt-to-GDP ratio, if you could double the trend growth that we've got at the moment through the kind of things I've touched on, hold on, that line goes like that, down to that, OK? The problem gets dealt with through higher growth. So the key is higher growth. So what you don't do is what this government's doing. What you do is have a different
Every chancellor for the last 25, 30 years has sat and told people like me that's the answer and failed to deliver it. Why not deal with a specific thing that you could actually do? You could pull the lever and say, honestly, we are not going to do this gold-plated thing, the triple lock, for pensioners forever and ever. So
you've had my answer on the triple lock, but you're also saying, well, why don't you say what you'll do on things? I've been very clear, for example, on welfare, that budget is spiralling out of control, and it does need to be dealt with, and we will deal with it. As we were when we were in office.
Just very quickly, how many more Conservative MPs do you expect to jump ship to Nigel Farage's party now that they are more than 10 points ahead in the polls?
I can't predict the future. But what I can say, I'm not saying that, but what I can say with absolute certainty is when Danny jumped ship, which I'm sorry to have seen, he actually said, oh, well, the Conservative Party is all over. Anybody in this highly volatile political world of a multi-party system overlaying a first-past-the-post electoral system that can predict what party's going to win in 4 years' time is living in cloud cuckoo land. Right. OK. It is all to play for. We're doing all the hard work. We're holding this government to account. We have every opportunity to come good at the next election.
All right. Well, we'll have this conversation again.
An exam question that will be answered. Okay.
That's right. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Up next, we'll talk free speech with comedian and writer Graham Linehan.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away.
So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
Free speech, two words being tossed around a lot at the moment on both sides of the Atlantic. This week, a United States TV network cancelled a late-night show hosted by Jimmy Kimmel after comments he made about an assassinated right-wing political activist. Politicians and commentators on all sides have been accusing each other of either shutting down free speech or allowing it to happen. The writer and comedian Graham Linehan was recently arrested by armed police at Heathrow following social media posts about trans people. He joins me now from the United States. Good morning, Graham. Thank you for staying up so late for us. Did you have any anticipation that you were going to be arrested when you landed?
No, apart from a sort of general one that I feel whenever I'm in the UK. In the last few months before I left, I started to feel increasingly paranoid and restless about my ability to just be a normal person in the country. So I had a creeping unease throughout those months, but then when I came back, I had shaken it off by being in America for a while. So as soon as the plane landed, when I heard my name being called out, I knew what was going to happen. So yeah, it was unexpected, but expected at the same time.
What actually took place? So you land, you get off the plane, and then?
Yeah, there was a pause. People were told not to stand up immediately, which is always unusual because even the crew are usually excited to get off. And then they called my name, and I just kind of got my stuff, which is never the most graceful sight at the best of times. But knowing I was about to be arrested made it slightly worse. And I went out, and they were flanking the doorway, And I didn't think I was going to be arrested. So I've been met by police before. I was met by police in New Zealand at New Zealand airport, and they were there to ensure that the speaking gigs I did were going to be safe for me, because there were, of course, threats and so on. So I was surprised when they actually arrested me. I didn't think that was going to happen, especially for tweets that were mostly harmless. One, which was good safeguarding advice for any woman, and two, silly things that I just kind of, conversationally threw online one day. I never thought that anyone would be so offended by them.
Obviously, Graham, there are people who would say that the tweets were offensive and so on and so forth. Just one quick point. I mean, we can't get into detail. We need to stay clear of the legals. But I read somewhere that you are planning to sue the police. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. That's right.
On what grounds?
False imprisonment. We don't think the arrest was legal. I have been, the trans activists have been using the police for roughly 8 years now to harass me. There's been, 3 reports.
I'm only going to stop you there, Graham, because we're treading on to some legal grounds here, which probably we don't need to.
No, don't worry. I'm used to it. I know what I'm saying. But that is the case. The police are being used as a sort of a goon squad for these guys.
Let me ask you about a wider question. J.D. Vance says that the United Kingdom is in danger of undermining freedom of expression, and to some extent he's supported by the president. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, it's clearly true. Just before I came on here now, Trevor, there's another story about police going to someone's door to check on them for a social media post, and it's never for anything other than, like an offence related to either trans-identified men or something to do with the current fears people have about immigration. And it is very dangerous. I certainly felt it for at least 8 years. I had a musical that was ready to go, taken away by my colleagues, and I've realised very quickly that simply standing up for women's rights had become so controversial in the UK that we weren't safe, and it's not just me, it's plenty of women who've been put in a cell or punished in courts. And it's been going on for about 8 years, almost a decade now.
I am, of course, at the other end of the entertainment business. There's nothing funny about anything I do. But it seems to me that the life of a comedian is quite a dangerous one these days. Are the supporters of Jimmy Kimmel correct that he is being silenced by the Trump administration? Are you with Kimmel on this?
Well, I certainly don't think that the Trump administration should be influencing decisions made by TV companies. That's definitely not on. But I do find it quite ironic, or I'm not sure what the word is, that 9 or 10 days after a man was shot through the neck for literally trying to speak, the symbol of Charlie Kirk's life is the microphone, not only in the sense that he used it himself, but he handed it to others and allowed them to make their points without interrupting, without being superior or arrogant or argumentative. And he was silenced forever. So the idea that Jimmy Kimmel is some sort of hero of free speech is quite absurd after that happened. And of course, the reason that it's happened to that extent is because on his death, Charlie Kirk has been smeared and lied about by the same people who lied about him during his life. So but everyone is terrified of approaching him as a person because he's been so vilified.
But isn't the essence here that actually, the late night comedians are supposedly allowed to say what they want to say, and at some level shouldn't be that important because they're not politicians. But what I think we're also hearing now is that there is a chilling effect on writers and comedians. Is that what you're observing? Do you feel that yourself, that there are things that you cannot or would not now write that you might have done, in the It Crowd days or the Father Ted days?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it would be impossible to do a comedy like Father Ted or the IT Crowd now. The feeling of 1,000 people looking over your shoulder as you write would be intolerable. And the 1,000 people looking over your shoulder are the various supposed minority groups that TV executives think need protecting. But of course, in comedy, everyone is a target. And it's how you show someone's humanity is that you show that they're not perfect, that they're funny, that they make mistakes. But all these, I have to say, white middle-class TV executives, they look down on everybody. So they think that when you make a joke, you're punching down. It's impossible to create comedy in that kind of atmosphere. And the only people who can survive in that kind of atmosphere are people who simply never say anything interesting, So, I mean, that's why I left for America. I just can't do what I want to do over in the UK anymore.
Okay, is satire dead?
It's dying. I don't know if you saw a spitting image, but oh boy, I can't. Another show that I was that I was slightly involved in was Brass Eye, Chris Morris's incredible boundary-breaking show. Imagine that being made now. It is impossible to imagine it being made now. And so we're going backwards. We're going backwards. We're not moving forwards. We're going backwards.
OK, well, we'll fly the banner for the unsayable here on Sunday morning. Thank you very much, Graham Linehan.
Thank you, Trevor.
In just a moment, we'll hear once again from our panel.
First Minister, how are you?
Good morning. Good morning.
Nice to see you. How are you feeling?
Looking forward to getting into the parliamentary chamber.
Are you any further forward to making a decision?
No, it's an important day today.
All of the claims were in line with my parliamentary duties, so I'm making that clear to you, Conor.
He was a Scot through and through.
He was a very good politician.
Alex Salmond was controversial, he was a disruptor, but above all, he was respected.
Will you resign if you lose this week?
Again, I'm not planning to, of course, lose the vote of no confidence. I'm planning to win that vote of no confidence.
His face said it all.
My intention to stand down as party leader.
This is now a storm with deadly consequences. How are they feeling?
They're a bit scared at the minute.
We've been told to evacuate.
How are you feeling?
Devastated.
Hundreds of homes were wiped out by flooding. I'm Conor Gillis, Sky's Scotland correspondent.
It was probably the darkest time in my life.
Scott is 5 years sober after a cocaine addiction left him close to death. Scotland has a shameful record, worse than England, the worst in Europe.
So why not just say you've failed? Because then you might get more respect from families who've lost loved ones.
This is where one of the UK's most prolific rapists thought he'd got away with murder.
Sky News can reveal that former sex workers had told police he was sexually violent.
My Emma.
Free wherever you get your news.
It's over, isn't it?
The Americans say he is, Rossi, a fraudster.
This has been one of the most bizarre cases ever heard in a courtroom in this country.
A dangerous murderer.
Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive Andrew Ennis after this?
She said she can forgive him, but as long as he's behind bars.
By doing the right thing, it's destroyed your life.
They terrorised me. They intimidated me.
I'm so grateful.
Sky News, the full story first.
Liberation Day.
By popular demand, here we are.
Donald Trump. It is quite the story. Wherever it goes, on Trump 100, we go with it.
Can you tell us who you're looking for?
Unbelievable we've come to this.
Are you overstating the reach and significance of this deal?
Not like you said it.
From the UK.
Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
It was 10 feet from him, and all of a sudden the shots rang out.
People impacted.
I'll tell you on another day on the podcast what that was all about.
Join us wherever you get your podcasts.
I want to start the programme today with an aim, a story that I can't get out of my head. The campaign has now started. This is your chance. Tell people this is the Politics Hub. It's not correct. The tax burden is projected to go up.
No,
but I'm not. This is my interview. Look, this is ridiculous.
No one does care about us.
I'm really interested in that. On the Politics Hub, we like to push the boundaries. He's got the majority. The question is, what is he going to do with it?
I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories.
This is insane.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa. I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
We call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Back to our panel, Gerard Baker, Joe Swinson and John McTernan. Let me just to declare an interest. You know, ranting about politics is my business. But, you know, Jimmy Kimmel, get out of here. But is there something that's gone really wrong here with thin-skinned White House, interference, all that?
Yeah, there is. And let's start with Graham Linehan. And, you know, what happened to Graham Linehan, I hope I'm allowed to say this legally, was absolutely disgraceful. Just an extraordinary thing. And it does represent, to me, the climate of the free speech that this country did used to absolutely lead the world in and take for granted. And the fact that you can hear, frankly, Sir Ed Davey, you know, earlier in your show saying, label, you know, the Liberal Party, the Party of Freedom, labelling a man, Elon Musk, a criminal, which, by the way, I would think if in the unlikely event that Ed Davey did ever have any political power and tried to arrest Elon Musk, from what I know about English law, the fact that he'd already been called a criminal by the man who'd be Prime Minister would probably finish that case. But the idea that someone like that should be arrested, that shows again, I think, the extent to which there has been this extraordinary suppression of dissonant opinion. Now, you talk about Jimmy Kimmel. You know, I live in the United States. I think what the Trump administration did was unwise and wrong in terms of the head of the FCC, which is the regulatory body for broadcasting, threaten ABC about what Jimmy Kimmel had said. But it comes, Trevor, in the context of years and years and years of cancel culture in which people who did not hold the views of Jimmy Kimmel, people, conservatives like me and others, were constantly being cancelled by news organisations, by media companies and others, by universities, by cultural institutions and everything else. We've had this, that the squeeze on free speech in the United States, as in this country for the last 20 years, has been against those people who dissent from the progressive ideology that dominates the thinking in so many of these institutions. I'm not surprised there's a backlash.
I've got no idea why the Metropolitan Police used scarce and precious manpower personnel to go to the Heathrow. If they want a word with Graham Linehan, they had gone to the magistrate's court because he was coming here to a magistrate's court because he was charged for harassing a teenager.
That's a separate issue. But
there's something about there's a legal process going on to deal with harassment and all of these things. And the thing that's sad about Graham Linehan is how unfunny he's become. We're not going into TV criticism this morning, but tell you what strikes me is
Are we getting all this out of perspective? Look at this map. This is from RSF, Reporters Without Borders. And it's a map of, if you like, journalistic and artistic repression across the world. And to be honest,
Netherlands is high.
If you look at where things are really serious, Eritrea, North Korea, China, and so on.
Russia's not there.
Are we getting knickers in a twist here?
Well, I mean, clearly we are still... we have the enjoyment of a very free, by global standards, set of circumstances. But has freedom of speech come under challenge and changed in recent years? Yes, I think it has. And I think that's partly because of the division of society. Obviously, it has always been limited by, you're not allowed to incite violence, you're not allowed to go into a busy, room and shout fire and, create havoc. You're not allowed to, walk down the street and yell something at somebody that's abusive on a regular basis. There's obviously limits to that. But here's what I think is different. It used to be that you would have all of this kind of satire, and, I grew up in the 80s and 90s and Spitting Image and all of this kind of amazing, satire, but that the debate that was held within the kind of main public sphere on the main broadcasters, within Parliament, was all very respectful. All of those parliamentary traditions of, incredibly courteous. And I think what has changed is our political leaders, our political debate has become so much more extreme. And we've also seen so much violence. 2 MPs have been assassinated. So I think that's where the concern has come from on the relationship between this speech and what else.
I don't want to suppress your free speech, Jo, but before we end, we've got about a minute or so. I just want to return to politics, because that's what we're in the business of. Interesting thing happened this week, that we saw this week, which tells you how things have changed. School background is an influence, apparently, on the way that you vote. And if you look at this chart, which is going to pop up here, here's a striking thing. The place where Labour is ahead is amongst private school graduates.
It's a picture of the inversion of British political demography. We've seen it in the United States too over the last 50 years. The Labour Party, the left, the Democrats in the US used to be the party of working people. The party of the Republicans and the Conservatives were the party of the establishment. Now the left is the party of the establishment. It's no surprise to me that people with luxury beliefs, with the education that they get with their luxury beliefs, support the Labour Party.
The great success of the Labour movement has been to move people from being working class to middle class. I'm pleased to see that we're over-indexed in private school kids.
Jo?
Yeah, I mean, I think it shows that, people from ordinary backgrounds think there's a lot that's going wrong and that the current government doesn't have the answer. Reform isn't the answer either.
That is it for this week's show. I will be back next Sunday with you at 8:30. You can watch Sophie every evening this week and at 7 o'clock with more politics. See you then.